Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast. My name's Toby Haydock, and I watch a story chosen by a friend of mine, all the while dropping in facts, thoughts and observations, and trying to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each instalment might be.
Hi Toby, as you can see, I'm recording this urgent message from Gallifrey. The capital has been destroyed and replaced with cafes, shops and offices. There are some remnants of the Time War, as you can see behind me. Several Daleks have been frozen in time in the middle of their invasion. But I'm okay. For the people from your podcast who don't know me, I am Nev Fountain. I am a writer of many things. I'm mainly known for comedy because I contribute to Private Eye and Dead Ringers. And I do write some murder mystery books with a science fiction twist. My Doctor Who claim to fame is I've written several Big Finish audios, a couple of Big Finish documentaries, and a couple of comic strips. The story I want you to watch, Toby, is set on Gallifrey, and it is called The Invasion of Time. What a fantastic roller coaster ride of madness it is. A story that only half the time looks as though it's being made up as it goes along. I have many happy memories of watching this story and reading it with the Target novelizations. I used to read the whole of Series 15 from the time K9 Mark 1 arrives in Invisible Enemy to when he leaves in The Invasion of Time. And as they were all about 8 pages apiece, thanks Terence, I could read them all in an afternoon. The Invasion of Time thrilled me watching it and in print. It is such a mad, crazy story which went to places that Doctor Who never did. Particularly as a 10-year-old boy, I never realised it could go to those places. And to bring back Gallifrey and to bring back the Sontarans, which wasn't that often in those days, absolutely knocked my socks off. It was absolutely fantastic. And combined with a story that seemed so dangerous and unpredictable and made the hero into a villain and made the companion doubt him, those were story choices I thought were incredibly brave and incredibly exciting. So will you sit down, put a crazy straw in your drink and watch The Invasion of Time?
Well, welcome everybody to this edition of Happy Times and Places. I'm going to be watching The Invasion of Time, as chosen by Nev Fountain. Nev Fountain. I've known Nev for years now, I think, but I actually, even though we're in the same business, we both work in comedy, and I mean, Nev was a name in comedy when I was, still taking my tottering steps into the business, I think, and I was at the sort of grassroots of the stand-up circuit while he was writing things for TV and radio, and he writes for Private Eye, a leading satirist, an excellent writer. Nev, a very witty man, but sharp and clever too. And, it's no coincidence that Dead Ringers and Private Eye often have a little bit of Who content in. I smell Nev's influence there. But I knew him as a comic person before I discovered he was a Doctor Who fan. And then that was a delight, because you always want Doctor Who fandom to be involved in things that are successful. And Dead Ringers and Private Eye have both been very successful over the years. And then I met him at a Doctor Who convention in America, I think, and we got to know each other a bit, and we see each other and we talk, and he's a great supporter of these podcasts, always sending me nice things, which, seeing as he, is a leading light of, the proper comedy media. I do a lot on the live circuit, but, that's 200 or 300 people at a time. Nev's stuff is going out there and influencing the nation. So I doff my cap, and I'm very flattered and privileged that I'm on his radar. So thanks to Nev. And he asked if he could do one of these. And there's another story that he wants to do, which I might let him do, actually. But anyway, for now, he's doing The Invasion of Time, which is a story that, I was so after this story for many years because it had a very exciting title and it was a Target book. It was, one of those ones that are available, but I didn't know anything about it. And then I found out it had got Sontarans in it, and I decided I loved Sontarans after I'd read the book already of the Time Warrior and the Sontaran Experiment, but I'd never seen them. But I'd seen lots of pictures, particularly of the Time Warrior, and there's a great Doctor Who magazine archive on that with some lovely pictures. So the Sontarans kind of intrigued me, and because I'd not seen them, this was prior to the Two Doctors, and I've already done a Happy Times on Places on the Two Doctors, which is the first time I saw the Sontarans in action. But this was a story that intrigued me to really, really want the book. So I remember when I did see it in a bookshop, or in fact, I might dig my Target book out on another episode. I might have even got to choose it as a school prize. Let me see if it's got a slip in it. But anyway, it was definitely one I coveted, especially when I found out it had Sontarans in it. And I finally got it. I was slightly... the pictures that I saw made me think the Sontarans looked slightly odd, because those pictures do make them look a bit skew, particularly the one on the Target cover, which I know is taken from a still that shows the particular. So they're not quite as symmetrical, I would say, these Sontarans, as the others. But we'll get on to them. Spoilers. I mean, that's the big reveal in episode 4, and we're in episode 1. I'm terribly sorry if you're coming into this fresh. Oh God, have I just read? Because I do have people who are listeners and feedbackers on the Patreon who have not seen some of the stories, but I would presume if they've even seen the DVD cover or the book cover, it's a spoiler. It's a spoiler that probably hasn't kept itself under wraps in the previous 50 years, but nonetheless, it does feel sometimes slightly beholden upon me to let things, to unveil things as they go. But I haven't, and I'm sorry. But let's wind back to episode 1, which has no Sontarans in it at all, but it has all sorts of other delights. Yeah, it's a curious one, this, because then I did get it, and I got it in the days of bootlegs before, commercial videos were available, and not a very good quality one. And I think it was a time when I'd started to get a bit spoiled. When I started collecting, I was getting one tape at a time, so I sort of savoured everything. But by this time, I'd met people, and I could borrow videos off people. So I'd come home with a pile of 2, 3, or 4, and I'd just sort of hoover them up. So I remember, and the revelation that mid Tom Baker was a slightly tattier era than perhaps the two that I was more familiar with, because I'd watched season 18 go out, and of course I'd coveted and lauded and been very pleasantly surprised to see that the Hinchcliffe era had held up extremely well. But there was all, but at this time of fan writing and digestion, it suddenly had become fashionable to sort of point out some of the shortcomings and particularly production wise of the Graham Williams era, even though I'd actually grown up watching season 17 and not realised quite how tatty that was. But it was then a shock to go back and realise, oh, okay, you can actually see some of the, the underwhelming nature of the production in sometimes, and actually how things get through by the skin of their teeth. And I think I was becoming a bit aware of wayward Tom Baker as well. But of course, one goes through that, and one goes through the agony of that, and then comes out the other side and learns to love all of Doctor Who for what it is, not for what it isn't. Even so, when I did Running Through Corridors, my book with Rob Shearman, I remember struggling a bit with this one and going up and down. Some episodes I enjoyed more than others. And so it's not one I seek out an awful lot. I did see it recently behind the sofa with Louise Jameson and Betsan Roberts. But so I will be interested to see how I cope with this one. It's got many things that I know I will love. It's got many things I know I will have got over since that time when I probably watched it slightly squirming at what I imagined the general public might feel were its shortcomings. But I also know that I do prefer the earlier and the later Tom Baker to the one that's running rings around Graham Williams, his producer, a bit because he knows he can. Oh, I did watch this. Of course, I did a commentary with Tom Baker for the season 15 box set, and I remember quite enjoying that. Those were quite tricky sessions, but by the time I think we got to Invasion of Time, we'd hit our stride a bit, and he'd done sort of testing me and got with the program, as it were. So yeah, I was actually remember being quite pleased with this one, having not been wild about my own contribution to some of the others, or perhaps it was just a process that needed to be got through with Tom while Tom sort of tested the waters with me. So anyway, but those are all stories for another day. Let us tune in to episode 1 of The Invasion of Time, which I am watching on the BBC iPlayer. Isn't that a thing? Wouldn't have dreamed that when I was younger. And we are going to press play in 3, 2, 1. So here we are. I'm watching The Invasion of Time, a story that is not high on many people's lists. I will be interested to see what Nev makes of it. I remember being shocked at quite how easy this was a time when I think I'd become attuned to watching old Doctor Who and realizing where bits of it went wrong in this era where you can see the joins a lot of the time, particularly, although this is a lovely, because of course this is where the production team have been to see Star Wars, isn't it? God, we're never going to be able to manage to do that. But this opening shot is, the Doctor Who equivalent of the opening shot of Star Wars, and it's not bad, but it's actually a very good model. I do like a model, but here, if you'll notice, we start almost immediately with continuity error because the Doctor's scarf is on the clothes hanger there, and he's also wearing it, and when he comes in shortly, he will be without it, and it sort of immediately says, people's eyes aren't necessarily across this. But I remember when I was sort of discovering Doctor Who, as I did through the pages of Doctor Who: A Celebration by Peter Haining and the Doctor Who Radio Times 20th Anniversary Special. This one was, it said in Doctor Who: A Celebration, actually it said it was directed by General Blake. That was an early version of autocorrect there, turning Gerald Blake into General Blake. Although when I was younger, it wasn't inconceivable that somebody would be called General. But I noticed that the Williams era did something that nobody really talks about so much these days, is that Graham Williams, who's now I think seen as not a stronger personality producer as Philip Hinchcliffe, gets in directors, Alan Bromley, Gerald Blake, from the past. Bromley had done The Time Warrior, Gerald Blake had done The Abominable Snowman, who haven't done Doctor Who since, in order to maybe these veterans he thought would be able to handle Tom Baker. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but it seems interesting that directors with Who experience but not immediate history Who experience actually get brought up back for this era with actually not hugely successful results, which is interesting because Gerald Blake did The Abominable Snowmen, which I love and I think is a fantastic piece of work from what we can see. Gerald Blake was also a popular director in terms of his personality. I think he was convivial. I think he was cheerful. I think cheerfulness and conviviality might also be euphemisms occasionally for like to drink here and there. And I certainly think he was a very socializing director from what I understand. He was great friends with a friend of mine, Bernard Holly, but Bernard said that actually it was quite difficult in Gerald's later years in that he struggled for work. So I wonder if maybe he'd approached Doctor Who and said, look, I did Doctor Who in the old days, can I do it now? But anyway, for whatever reason, he is back having done what I thought of definitely at this time that I was watching this, a classic, because everything before I was born was a classic. But look, Tom Baker hasn't got his scarf on, and he's just drawn attention to the fact that in the previous scene he had his scarf on while talking to the backs of 3 chairs. Well, no, he was talking to the fronts, but we could only see the backs. Yeah, you tell him, Leela. That's not very nice, is it? K9 is that's actually really spooky, isn't it? Because you think this might be the start of sort of TARDIS banter, but actually the Doctor's not very nice, and K9 has just sort of released his lipstick, his nose laser. Goodness me, I had forgotten that K9 was part of what will, spoilers, turn out to be a ruse. But of course, this is quite a convoluted plot, isn't it? I guess I need to stop distracting myself with what I know about what I expect to be the certain production shortcomings of this, and there will be particularly sort of design and I would say general tattiness. But we have so many delights, of course. Here we have the mighty Milton Johns, one of the greatest Doctor Who actors, because he is the kind of actor that I think serves Doctor Who so well, not just in terms of the number of performances. He was Guy Crayford in The Android Invasion not that long ago in terms of screen time here, and also Bennick in Enemy of the World. And he's, I would say, slightly miscast in Android Invasion and glorious in Enemy of the World. And I think he's brilliant in this. Christopher Tranchell playing Andrid there, I think was a good friend of Tom Baker's. I know Chris a little bit. He was actually a friend of a friend. He was a Doctor Who actor I sort of knew of when I was a kid, because my friend Ollie, who was a very, very good friend of mine, and I actually sometimes watched Doctor Who at Ollie's house, his family knew Chris Tranchell, and I think it must have been something to do with Survivors or something, because Chris had filmed Survivors out in that neck of the woods, and I remember Chris had said to Ollie, or said to Ollie's dad, I think Ollie had said that he'd turned into a cabbage head in a Doctor Who story, i.e. the Faceless Ones. I'd known it was I think I'd worked out it was the Faceless Ones. I don't think he mentioned the Massacre. Oh, but I think he did say he'd worked with 3 Doctors. So Hartnell, Massacre, Trout and Faceless Ones. And here he is in this as Andrid, of course, a very important part in terms of what happens to one of our companions. But Chris I also knew because he presented Play School. So he was quite a sort of face, and he was somebody who still popped up in things, but I always felt slightly sort of once removed. You know, he was a bit like Clifford Rose, who my mum worked with his sister-in-law. That, you know, was the odd actor that felt slightly special because they were sort of once removed, and when you live in the middle of the countryside, you don't really have such things. So I've always felt I have a kind of bond with Chris Tranchell, even though I didn't meet him until relatively recently when I was asked to give a talk at an equity meeting about my illustrious career, and so I did. It was the South East London equity meeting. I can't even remember how that came about, but anyway, I did, and Doctor Who popped up in my talk, and a couple of these actors at the front sort of, you know, perked up as if to go, I've been in Doctor Who, and I immediately went, oh my God, that's Chris Tranchell. He was, you know, he's much less hair and greyer, and Giles, not Giles Block, Tim Block from Black Orchid. But anyway, I'm segueing. Hello, welcome to Happy Times and Places, where I just talk about the vague connections I have, and I don't do that to be boastful. I'm aware that my version of name dropping is not one that that opens any doors or is in any way intended to be a boast. It's more to do with the way that this crazy programme weaves itself into our lives, and I'm sure we've all got stories of that. So please, when I do these sorts of things, because obviously I've met a lot of Doctor Who actors since at professional recordings and conventions and things like that, and I probably won't wang on about those quite so much, but I think the ones that inveigled their way into my childhood are more sort of interesting, particularly because my childhood was one where I was cut off from, we were often cut off from electricity, but I lived slap bang in the middle of nowhere. So the idea that, I would even rub shoulders once removed with an actor from TV's Doctor Who was amazing. So it was a little window into a glamorous world that I never thought I'd have part of. That's a lovely shot. I like the fact that Gerald Blake has taken the camera right back. I mean, it's not quite the same as Roger Murray Leach's beautiful panopticon set in The Deadly Assassin. And the design, I mean, those plastic chairs, for example, I think the design here may be one of the issues with it. But I remember this picture. It was on the front cover of a Doctor Who summer special that was advertised, I think, in a Doctor Who monthly that I'd got. I remember thinking, oh, that looks momentous. The Doctor has returned to Gallifrey and is flanked by these guards. Those guards' costumes are excellent, aren't they? What I like that Gerald Blake does here is, if you look at this gang of guards, is that each one of them kind of gets a line in different episodes. So that guy who just went Gallifrey there, he'll get a credit in this episode, but he will be in other episodes, but one of the others will get to be the guard that does something. And that happens for the first 4 episodes, actually. So let's look out for the guard who gets a line each week, because it's a different one. And that is a director who I think is, making good use of resources, but also he's spreading the workload. So that's nice. You see, these are great costumes, but great costumes in a tatty set or in a confined space can suddenly look a bit ungainly if you're not careful. And people are now sort of slightly rising to Tom Baker's challenge, aren't they? Chris Tranchell knew Tom Baker. Did he even live with him for a while? Or did he put Tom Baker up for a while? I think I managed to get that out of Tom in the commentary for one of these, which I was quite pleased about, because he kept trying to tell the same stories he always wants to tell. But this is this is slightly comical, isn't it? We're slightly starting to be encouraged to play Doctor Who as if we're playing it with a nod and a wink. And I don't mind that, I don't think, but I also hate it. I like the fact that it exists, whereas you see this is Tom Baker doing his sort of slightly detached, powerful acting. I always think there's something slightly glib about the way that the Doctor does it. That Tom Baker does it when he's doing, like when he does Meglos, where he's slightly detached and cold, but he's not quite chewing the scenery. It's almost like there's a part of him that can't quite be bothered. Now, I may be reading a lot of this into what I know of, what we know of Tom Baker and sometimes his attitude, and sometimes he doesn't play, and sometimes he's quite obtuse as a contributor. Do you know what I mean? He'll go, well, he'll like to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, and I think he might sometimes have dared a director to go, Tom, can you put a bit more welly into it? He'd go, I'm a Time Lord for the constellations of Consterberus. How do you know how much welly I'd put into it? But also what I know about Tom Baker is that when he likes an actor, like the mighty John Arnott, who is just so elegant, and famously, didn't he, said, I play a lot of boring parts. But of course, he's not boring at all. He is very dignified. And he's the sort of actor, I like an actor who can play, you need actors who can play boring parts, as it were. And I don't think Barusa's too boring, but he does have, he does have to take a lot of stuff that in lesser hands wouldn't particularly make much of an impact. And you need the actor to either be doing a lot to distract you from the fact that some of this can be slow going, or to do it with a certain sort of detached haughtiness that gives you a brilliant sort of a certain disdainful elan. But Tom Baker likes to, of course, when he's being a baddie as well, will suddenly sort of shout, and again it kind of works because the Doctor is unpredictable and is being severe. Yes, it's a peculiar, slightly disturbing performance, isn't it, this by Tom Baker, where you're not quite sure whether it's the acting that's slightly detached, but he shows a little that he's doing a little bit of effort there as well, or actually whether he's trying to suggest that the Doctor is struggling, or whether it's genuine. So I guess it's doing the job. I'm talking myself out of whatever issue I might slightly have with Tom Baker's evil performance, is that actually it is difficult to keep a track of, and it is disturbing, and it is wayward, and maybe that's all the things that it needs to be. And talking about, what Chris Tranchell was doing, I do quite like the sort of the funny bits in this when the actors are having fun. And yet, if it was an actor I didn't like, I would be cross with them. So it's very hard, I think, to be consistent when your cast or your director or just the general tone of your show is occasionally wanting to wink to the audience. And as an historical artifact, I can kind of grudgingly appreciate it, but I do think it shows a certain arrogance in a way that a program can be sort of going, well, we're just dicking about, aren't we? But I suppose they would say, well, no, it's our way of making this hokum entertaining, and I'm taking it way too seriously. And I can understand that too. It's a difficult. So I struggle because I quite like it when Doctor Who breaks the fourth wall or Doctor Who gets a bit meta. But maybe I only like it if it really, really works. And maybe the fact that this is a slightly tatty production means that I think perhaps it's a bit of a cheek to sort of be going, well, we're slightly better than this, or we're slightly better. Or is it? I don't know. I'm talking myself in and out of what I think, and I think that is an indication of how wayward this production is, because it's a mixture, isn't it? For this to work, we have to believe that the Doctor has turned bad, which I think when Tom is at his best here, we do. And I think John Arnott is doing a lot to help sell this, as is Milton Johns. But you know that you have this wonderful sense of disapproval from Barusa, who, of course, is a character that we know, but there's a lot that the audience are expected to remember, really, aren't they, from The Deadly Assassin, which is... which at this time in the show's history is an interesting move that they've expected the audience to remember, you know, a story that people didn't have access to, hasn't been repeated, all of that sort of thing. But this is good. This is good stuff. And we've got Chekhov's lead now. And of course that design that we're going to get in the room is all part of the feel of this show, because it's on the front cover of the Target book. So I very much, well, we'll get to that when we see the room, when it's been decked out. But Tom Baker is being very, very shifty here, and this is effective because it is keeping you guessing about exactly what his motives are. Even the soundtrack is doing a tarantula now and is being a bit sort of knowingly funny. These two are going to be in love in 2.5 hours time. It's a different costume, isn't it, for Louise from the one that she joined with, and her hair is slightly different too. I love Leela. I think Leela's a really good dynamic to have with the Doctor, and I don't think anyone disagrees that she's 100% committed to the performance, and she is always, she talks, doesn't she, about honouring the text, which, you want a proper serious actress treating it seriously in these roles, and she's absolutely that. Tom Baker, I mean, he's sort of in his underwear, isn't he, here? But it's it's Victorian underwear or whatever. It's the and I like it that we see the Doctor can sort of get down and dirty a little bit, but whilst it not being down to a vest or a something a bit more earthy. He's not in his overalls or anything like that. He's got it's like an old fashioned undershirt, isn't it? But he looks good. He looks good in anything. But he's very steely, and he's keeping it all internalized. Which again, in retrospect, you can sort of retcon it and go, because it's taking all of his mental energy to keep his true thoughts from the Vardens, who we have yet to see, of course. I love the way that, I mean, John Arnott is almost like he hasn't got any eyes, has he? He's got these tiny slits that he's sort of surveys everything through from a height. I bet he's got lots of books in Latin. I like the fact that Leela is pleased for the Doctor. I think that's really nice, and that she wants to see if there's anything ceremonial that she could do. And we had a little bit of nice business there. That would be nice. You see, that's quite funny. Now, Dennis Edwards, I think, has written to... This is Dennis Edwards and Reginald Jessup. Reginald Jessup had also been in the massacre. And Dennis Edwards had been in the Romans, and I think he wrote to, if it wasn't Gerald Blake, he wrote to somebody saying, "Oh, could I be in a Doctor Who because I've not done one?" And then I think he adds to the bottom of the letter, "Actually, come to think of it, I think I might have done one." And he did. He's the Centurion in the Romans, whereas Reginald Jessup here was in Quatermass 2. He also did. He was in Henry V at the Ludlow Festival, which is where I am from. I have an old theatre programme with him in. He was in my vicinity, but I think I was about 7, so I couldn't have asked him about Quatermass 2, even if I'd known what it was. But they're both dead now. But Dennis Edwards actually lived for quite a long time. I think he was around, and we just didn't realise it. And he pops up in all sorts of things. But yes, the sort of the gossipy Gallifreyans acting as a sort of chorus. We're seeing it through the eyes of the watching Gallifreyans. And here we have Charles Morgan, who I have seen compared vocally to Tom Baker. They both have a very similar voice. I think I brought that up in the commentary with Tom, and it didn't go anywhere. Sometimes you ask a question and hope it might pique something, and sometimes it does, and often it doesn't. And I think this is where Gallifrey does have problems with design, doesn't it? Those inflatable space pillows are very a designer, trying to add something futuristic to, because Gallifrey works so well because it has cloisters and old-fashioned things, and it's that very Hinchcliffe-y approach of going, well, if we make it old-fashioned, it won't date. But then we'll add some space pillows, and that sort of besets Arc of Infinity as well, where the corridors will have chairs with space cushions on. I think if you're a designer and you're doing Gallifrey, I think maybe dial back on the space cushions. But Charles Morgan has joined Gerald Blake from his previous Doctor Who, because both of them worked on The Abominable Snowmen, because Charles Morgan plays the very good part of Abbot Songsen. So he's returning with his director. I have seen a letter from Charles Morgan. Who shared that with me? Somebody's got one. Would it be Bignell? Would it be Phil Newman? I'm sorry, whoever it was. Somebody has very kindly showed me their letter from Charles Morgan, which is the sort of thing that just thrills me to be able to hold in my hand a letter from a long-dead character actor who remembered drinking a lot of, enjoying drinking brandy on the night shoots for The Abominable Snowman. But he's got a wonderful... you can see why he's got a slightly Tom Bakery sort of aspect and voice as well. And he's playing the Gold Usher. We had a Gold Usher in The Deadly Assassin before, so he's probably wearing the same costume that Maurice Quick wore in The Deadly Assassin. And these costumes are, of course, great. This is all Doctor Who looking at its heritage. And I suppose because this is the last story of the season, it is an attempt. I think we're sometimes surprised when the old series, I've been thinking a lot about Evil of the Daleks recently, which really does feel like a self-conscious attempt to create an epic. This, in an era of the show that I think sometimes is criticised for being a bit tatty and half-baked, they are clearly here saying, well, no, we're taking the Doctor back not only to his home planet, but also to address some issues from a previous big hitter of a story. So, and this is echoey, and this is a big set, and this feels, even though it has some of the trademark sort of fraying around the edges production-wise of some stories of this era, it feels like at least the intent here is to have be becoming a sort of epic conclusion to the season. And and all of this ceremony stuff is good, but look how detached Tom Baker is. He's doing, and this is what he likes to do when he's doing possessed or evil acting. He doesn't quite look anybody in the eye, which I believe he sometimes would be like in the rehearsal room. This sort of cold detachment stuff that he does. But this is an intriguing opening, because why is the Doctor being all bad? Why is he talking to those peculiar aliens that we can't see the faces of? He's being quite harsh. Look at Louise Jameson's very clever, isn't she? She does a little bit of a look around to see what everybody else is doing, because that's what Leela would do in those circumstances, and then she joins in. She's always keeping it interested and real. So now here the Doctor, his hair goes a bit less curly, doesn't it, when it's got the thing. It's odd seeing him with flat hair. I sometimes wonder if he doesn't commit. Sometimes when he's doing a cliffhanger, you see, I get a bit cross with him because, note, by the way, I've done a whole podcast on the order of credits. The order of credits changes on the Invasion of Time because it's an old director who's doing it from the time of Troughton, when the credits went Doctor Who and then everyone in order of appearance. You'll notice here he does the Doctor and the Companion and then everybody in order of appearance, which you do not get at any other time during the Tom Baker era. So this is the only time in the Tom Baker era that the cast, and it changes every time, is done pretty much in order of appearance. But John Arnott as Barusa always gets a solo caption. So even if he's not getting top billing, his name's bigger. So there we go. Do go and listen if you really want to. Do go and listen to my podcast on Indefinable Magic about the credits, and you'll get more of that kind of gold. But I do get I feel with Tom Baker there in that cliffhanger. I know he's doing sort of pained acting, but I think there is a sort of part of him that's also going, but I can't be that bothered. And he does that occasionally on cliffhangers. He does it in The Sunmakers at the end of episode 1, where he's supposed to be sort of collapsing, but he does a sort of comical shrug as well that you would do if you just missed the bus, and he's going, well, wouldn't it be witty if I did it when I'm just about to be gassed to death? And I think there's an element of that there where, a really committed Tom Baker would be grabbing that thing and he would be screaming like when he was under the rays of Sutekh or when he's touching the skull in Image of the Fendal. And here he's almost doing it half-heartedly, as if to say to the director, go on, you're gonna make me act this more, and they don't. That might be me reading too much into it, but it's a kind of sense that I get. And maybe, as I say, it's because of my general feeling about this one that it is not as sort of cohesive and coherent tonally a production, which is where I think it falls down when it does, because I don't think there's any one. I mean, a vision is a lofty word to apply to a Doctor Who story, but I just have. So anyway, but that's not. I don't know why I've been, because I really enjoyed watching that, and there's so much of that I like. But I think I've spent the whole of episode 1 explaining why maybe it's one that I've always had a few question marks over. So now I think I need to actually shut up in that regard and now talk about some of the things I did like, because I think it's fine and I think it's a perfectly enjoyable watch, and I don't want anybody whose favourite story this is to be going, why is being so down on it? I was trying to sort of assess the received wisdom about this story. So now let's dial into some of the positives, and whilst I'm doing that, I need to choose what I think Nev Fountain's number 1 positive will be, because that is the name of the game. So, what am I going to choose? Well, there's a number of things because what are the positives? Well, I do like the whole premise, the whole idea that the Doctor is up to no good. It's actually for an era that, as I say, is sometimes semi-serious, and you're not sure that everyone's 100% committed to. Because that's when Doctor Who really works, is when everyone's 100% committed to absolutely convincing you that the world in which you inhabit, even if it's one of stereotypes, or a certain performance style that is less than naturalistic, or certain, character types that are drawn very vividly. But if everyone is working hard to convince you that the world that they have created, and I've said this before, Doctor Who doesn't necessarily travel in time, it travels in genre, and it needs to convince you that the style of story they are telling this week, because it can go from a world of comic strip characters to a world of drama cliches to a world of plausible kitchen sink, with people sort of spouting sub-Shakespearean dialogue, or people again being much more straightforward drama of the week, juxtaposed with highfalutin alien or ridiculous, overblown monstrousness, fairy tale giants, etc. But if everyone convinces you that the world is real, you will go with it, and that the logic contained within that world is real. So, I think the attempt there to make the Doctor appear like a plausible threat, I think is... I'm particularly struck by K9 drawing the gun on Leela. I think that's a really effective moment, because there's something... You might kind of entertain the idea that there's something wrong with the Doctor, or that he's shamming, or for whatever reason. But when K9 does it, who is so honest, breathtakingly honest, just draws a gun on Leela, sticks his nose out at Leela. That was a very, very effective moment. Obviously, I love Gallifrey. I love those costumes. I love I do enjoy I love the design of the panopticon type area. I did love that shot of when the TARDIS landed. I thought that was some very good camera placement, and the guards flanking the Doctor as he came out. Yeah, the whole Gallifrey stuff I think is very good. Obviously, we have the wonderful John Arnott as Barusa, and the fantastic Milton Johns as Kellner, and there's one moment that Milton Johns will do later in the story that is one of my favourite moments in the whole of Doctor Who. And Nev has recorded all of his, so if he hasn't chosen that already, it's too late. But yeah, I think for me the best thing about episode 1 of The Invasion of Time is that premise, is that ruse, is that idea that the Doctor is either bad or he's up to something, and we don't quite know what or why. We know there's something wrong, but we don't know what it is, and it's quite unsettling. It's occasionally quite scary. But you want to think, yeah, he's up to something. And then they do have that couple of moments where it's just him, and he's sort of, he's exhausted by the mental strength that this is requiring. But I think it's intriguing, and it's done well. So I'm going to choose the fact that the Doctor might be bad. I think it's a great start to a story. The story sort of, it starts running. He's immediately talking to the aliens. He's immediately cut off Leela. K9's immediately doing what he says, and he's they're straight to Gallifrey, and he's bossing everybody about and not explaining himself. Yeah. So yes, scary, potentially evil Doctor is my favourite thing about episode 1. What is Nev's favourite thing about episode 1?
Hello, Toby. My favourite thing from episode 1 of The Invasion of Time are the scenes between the Doctor and Chancellor Barusa. The concept of the Doctor as a mad king felt incredibly right when watching it in 1979, and it feels even more right when you find out how Tom Baker behaved behind the scenes. I like to think that Anthony Reid and Graham Williams took what they knew and wrote it towards Tom to give him something to play with. And I think Tom rises to the occasion with an incredibly fantastic, lordly, unpredictable performance. And John Arnott, as Chancellor Barusa, really plays it straight. and really plays it calm. The idea of the pupil becoming the tyrant and the teacher becoming the servant is incredibly interesting and very exciting. The parallels with this and I, Claudius, were lost to me when I was 10, but they certainly appeal to me now. But something in that appealed to me as a boy. I think Doctor Who doing weird and unpredictable things which are alien to his character is an incredibly exciting thing. And him shouting and hollering at this dear old man certainly makes for exciting viewing, to me anyway. So that's my choice for episode 1. The Doctor yelling at Chancellor Baruza.
Yes, I suppose that's a subsection of what I chose, but I'm not sure I'm entitled to the point. But beautifully put by Nev, and I hadn't really thought of it in terms of Reed and Williams almost sort of conjuring the Tom Baker they know from behind the scenes. And I can certainly imagine Tom Baker being, distant, not looking people in the eye, being moody, being sharp, being petulant, being bullish, being scary. So yes, that is quite a wise year. It's almost rather meta, isn't it? And the idea of the Mad King, which is a very literate take on what this tea time piece of TV sci-fi is doing. It has its roots in classic literature and drama. And yes, the idea of we know that Baruza is. So that's interesting, isn't it? I would always say Barusa, but because Nev is saying Baruza, I've sort of chameleonized my pronunciation. It's like my Geordie friend Helen, who's got a mild Geordie accent until all her Geordie friends come and they start drinking, and then they all turn the Geordie up to 11. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so Barusa man is a great character because of the sort of suppressed nature of Arnatt's performance as he kind of doesn't lose his cool and is clearly calculating. I always like it when an actor shows that there's something going on inside whilst seemingly showing nothing at all. That's very clever acting, to keep an inscrutable facade but suggest the cogs whirring beneath. Troughton's very good at that. There's so much in what John Arnott does. And I think that helps bring out the best in Tom Baker too. So I don't think I can get a point, even though Nev and I were, hanging around similar areas to get our pleasure. Good. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I promise that in future instalments of The Invasion of Time, I will get over trying to outline why perhaps it was one I'd approached with some trepidation and start to enjoy it a bit more on its own terms, because I did enjoy that episode. It's lovely seeing Gallifrey. It's lovely seeing all of those actors. Some of the camera work's very nice. It's also interesting, seeing some of the production issues and how they cope with them. But also because these episodes, sort of between now and when the big reveal at the end of episode 4, they're a sort of strange beast that I've never quite, I think, got to grips with, because obviously in retrospect the headline news about The Invasion of Time is actually only the last third of the story. And when it was being watched first time, and as it unfolds in terms of the storytelling that it does, we've got a whole stories with. We've got 4 episodes that don't have any of that in it. So I need to sort of assess those on their own terms, really. But how exciting! I'm very glad that everyone has joined me for this. I'm really pleased that Nev has contributed to this. And please, if you don't know, you must know Nev. Please do go and seek out his work. But until the next time, wherever you are, I hope it's a happy time and a happy place. And I will now put the transduction barrier back up and protect myself until next we meet. But until then, goodbye to you, and thanks ever so much for listening. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Nev Fountain, who you can find on Twitter at Nev Fountain. I'm grateful to Nev and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Matthew Speddings, Joey Stephen, David Spofford, Chris Stokes, Adam Stone, Mark Swan, Matthew Tate, Dr. Gary Thomas, Richard Thomas, Jason Thompson, Alex Tilbury, Sabrina Tirabassi, David Trainier, Sidney Trowett, Jim Trenowden, Fanman Sang, John Turner, Colin Varney, Earworm, Lee Wakerley, Gary Wales, Jeff Walker, Steve Walker, Alistair Wallace, Craig Wallace, Gavin Ware, Peter Ware, Stephen Waters, Kevin West, Rich Wiggins, David James Wilson, Chris Williams, Mr. Withit, Stephen Witkowski, Lee Wood, David Workman, Alan W. Wright, and Mark Wright. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you too would like your name read out on the credits, well, that happens if you go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock. Getting your name read out of the credits is a minor treat compared to the advance material you get. The bonus releases, monthly AMAs, sometimes more than one a month. Look behind the scenes at any DVD or Blu-ray extra that I make. Some interviews from my archives and all sorts of other things. It costs as little as £3 a month, and you get everything at the lowest tier, although the tiers do go up. It's a pay what you can sort of system. But if you don't want to be trapped in a monthly situation where you have an obligation like that, you can just donate whenever you like and whatever amount you like at kofi.com/Toby Haydock. That's KO-FI. And it's just a way of sort of funding self-employed artists like myself to do the stuff that we do. If you like it, it is my income really, as I make things and hope people like them. So if you can do that, I would be grateful. But if you can't, or even if you don't want to, that's fair enough. I listen to loads of podcasts I don't pay for, so practice what I preach. But what you can do, and I do this to one of them, is 5-star review, thumb up, like, subscribe, do all of that stuff that tickles the algorithms, because that really, really does help. I'm all over social media. I have a YouTube channel, Toby Haydock, if you could like and subscribe and do all of that to that. I also am on Twitter /X at Haydock Podcasts and at Toby Haydock. My comedy club is on Blue Sky at XS Malarkey. I'm also there. You can find me. We're both on Instagram. Myself and XS Malarkey, my comedy club, are both on Instagram. I'm at Toby.Haydock. It's at XS Malarkey. And I've got a Facebook page as well. So does XS Malarkey. So, follow me. But the comedy nights, they're good too. And a lot of fun. If you've listened to me doing all of this rubbish, come and see me where I do what my proper job is. And your support wherever you digest any of the stuff that I seem to fling out in every direction is gratefully received. Right, well, I've got as gazillion things to do. Sorry, that's we watched a show called Billions, which is very good. Paul Giamatti and Damien Lewis. We kind of lost track of it. We got to the end of season 1 and dropped it. We've done that a few times, my partner and I. But for some reason, I have an annoying habit of pronouncing things wrongly, and it's sort of sticking. So we don't say delicious in our house anymore. We say delicious. Shez did it the other day and said, why have I started saying that now? And I go, I don't know, because it annoys me too. But I used to call billions gazillions. I don't know why. And so now whenever I want to say billions, I say gazillions. Why am I even saying gazillions? Is it because I've got a gazillion things to do? I'm going to a Doctor Who convention tomorrow, and I've got a long train journey, and I also need to tart up a different podcast and do various other bits and bobs. You don't need to know that, but anyway, that's so. This post-credits bit that is totally unnecessary anyway. I don't know why I still do these. It's not what you tuned in for. And I just have to give myself 2 or 3 minutes extra work. And I've spent this one explaining why I'm not going to be doing that today. So there we go. That's your extra bit. I bet that was worth gazillions. Bye.